In 2015, Costco's chief financial officer, Richard Galanti, told investors something that sounded, on its face, like a management failure. The company was losing $30 to $40 million a year. Not on a bad acquisition, not on a failed product line, on chickens. Specifically, on the rotisserie chickens near the exit, sitting under heat lamps, priced at $4.99. That price had not moved in years, and it would not move for years more. Each bird cost Costco roughly $6 to $7 to produce. At $4.99, they were handing every customer a loss of somewhere between $1.50 and $2. Galanti confirmed this publicly and then, essentially, shrugged. Because Costco was not in the chicken business. It was in the business of getting people through the door so they could sell them a television, a case of wine, and a pallet of toilet paper. The chicken was the bait. The price was the lure. The rest of the warehouse was the trap. This is called a loss leader, an item sold at or below cost, deliberately, to drive traffic that pays for itself on everything else in the basket. It is one of the oldest strategies in retail, and it has a product that takes it further than any rotisserie chicken ever could. The chicken is the analogy. Milk is the system. Most people have no idea what they paid for their last bag of crisps, or their last bottle of shampoo. But milk? They know. Within a few pence. Within a few cents. They have known since they were old enough to be sent to a shop on their own. This is what economists call a known value item. A product so frequently purchased, so universally needed, that its price is stored in people's memory the way a phone number used to be. And that property makes it uniquely powerful as a loss leader, because the shopper can verify the discount instantly, without checking anything. In the United States in 2024, a gallon of whole milk averaged $4.39 at retail. The margin between what the retailer paid and what they charged was around $1.37 per gallon. That margin had to cover refrigeration, transport, spoilage, and labor. On a promotional week, it covered none of them. In the UK, the gap is similarly tight. A dairy farmer receives around 45 pence per litre. The shopper pays around 79 pence. Between those two numbers sits everything: collection, pasteurization, packaging, distribution, chilling, and retail handling. When a supermarket prices milk below its own landed cost, all of that margin disappears. The store loses money on every liter it sells. The question is not whether supermarkets do this. They do, and they have for decades. The question is how a business that deliberately loses money on one of its most frequently purchased products ends up more profitable because of it. To understand that, you need to start with what a supermarket actually sells, not food. What a supermarket sells is a belief. The belief that everything in this building is reasonably priced. The food is evidence for the belief. The belief is the product. Here is the mechanism. A shopper knows that milk costs, say, £1.10. They walk in and see it on the shelf for 99 pence. They do not consciously think, this store has discounted one item. They think, instinctively, this store is cheap. That perception follows them through every aisle for the next 40 minutes. David Ortega, a food economist at Michigan State University, described it this way. Loss leaders are items that are sold at or below cost in order to be able to draw customers and drive sales of other, more profitable items. The margin the store gives up on the milk, it recovers on the pasta, the olive oil, the premium yogurt, the bottle of wine that was never on any list. And milk has one structural advantage most loss leaders lack. In almost every large supermarket, it is placed as far from the entrance as the building allows. To reach it, a shopper walks past fresh produce, the bakery counter, snacks, ready meals, and the chocolate aisle, guided through every high-margin section in the building. Set the price low, make them walk. Recover the loss on everything they pick up along the way. That is the first layer. But there are 4 more. In June 2018, Walmart opened a building in Fort Wayne, Indiana. 250,000 square feet, $165 million. Not a store, a milk processing plant. Walmart's first ever food manufacturing facility in the United States. The Fort Wayne plant sourced raw milk from 25 to 30 farms within roughly 200 miles, processed and bottled it on site, and distributed the finished product to around 500 Walmart stores across Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and northern Kentucky. Walmart had cut the dairy processor entirely out of its supply chain. Kroger had seen this logic years earlier. By the time Walmart opened Fort Wayne, Kroger was already processing approximately 90% of its own milk across 17 dairy plants nationwide. 17 plants. More processing capacity than most standalone dairy companies own. Here is why that matters. When a supermarket that owns its own processing plants sells milk below the market rate, it is not taking the same loss an independent grocer would. The cost it measures against is its own internal cost, not a supplier's invoice. The loss is real, but it is structurally smaller than it looks from the outside. The supermarkets built their way into dairy processing specifically so they could afford to lose money on the shelf. The factory is not a cost. It is the thing that makes the whole strategy sustainable. Someone else paid for that. And when the bill arrived, it arrived fast. Dean Foods was the largest dairy processor in the United States. It supplied milk to grocery chains across the country and had done so for decades. On the 12th of November 2019, it filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Eric Berengaus, who had become Dean Foods' third CEO in 3 years just 4 months earlier, issued a statement. The company, he said, had been impacted by a challenging operating environment marked by continuing declines in consumer milk consumption. That was the official version. The operational version is this. Walmart and Kroger had built their own plants, stopped buying from outside processors, and the volume Dean Foods had relied on to stay viable simply evaporated. The biggest dairy company in America ran out of customers. 6 weeks later, Borden Dairy filed. Tony Sarsam, Borden's CEO, was more direct. The company had been hit by the rising cost of raw milk, up 27% since January 2019, while its ability to pass those costs on to supermarkets had completely collapsed. You cannot raise your price to a customer whose entire strategy depends on selling your product below cost. 2 of the most recognizable names in American dairy went bankrupt within 6 weeks of each other. The supermarket chains that had squeezed them out did not go bankrupt. They went and built more plants. The loss on milk is visible. There is another income stream attached to the same shelf that is almost entirely invisible to the shopper, and it is, by some measures, more significant than the milk loss itself. When a food manufacturer wants its product placed on a major supermarket shelf, it pays for the space. These are called slotting fees. According to a Federal Trade Commission report, placing a single product across a national chain can cost the manufacturer between $1.5 and $2 million. For a regional rollout, the fee can still run into the hundreds of thousands. Safeway disclosed in its 2011 annual report that it collected $2.9 billion in vendor allowances that year, roughly 6.5% of its total revenue. $2.9 billion, not from selling food, but from charging food companies for the right to appear on the shelves where food is sold. The mechanism works like this. A breakfast cereal company wants guaranteed placement in a national chain. It pays the chain for that guarantee. The chain takes that payment and uses it, in part, to subsidize the items it needs to keep permanently cheap: milk, eggs, bread, the things whose prices the shopper actually tracks. The brand pays the fee. The customer sees the low price. Nobody draws the connection. The loss leader is, in this sense, not really a loss at all. It is a cost that has been quietly invoiced to the manufacturer standing next to it on the shelf. There is a fourth mechanism. It is the most recent, it is probably the most lucrative, and it has almost nothing to do with the price of milk at all. It has to do with the fact that you bought it. Tesco operates a loyalty program called Club Card. In its most recent full financial year, 84% of Tesco's UK sales were tied to a Club Card transaction. Not 84% of members' purchases, 84% of all sales across the entire business. Approximately 23 million UK households hold an active club card. That is close to 80% of all UK households. Every time a club card holder buys milk, Tesco records the transaction at the individual level. This person, on this date, at this store, bought this product, was shown this promotion, and did or did not respond. That data does not sit quietly in a warehouse. It becomes a product that Tesco sells. Kroger does this through a subsidiary called 84.51 Degrees. It tracks the purchasing behavior of more than 60 million households and sells access to that intelligence to more than 1,500 consumer packaged goods companies. In 2023, Kroger's alternative profit division, which includes 84.51 Degrees, generated $1.3 billion in operating profit. The shopper who buys milk every Tuesday at 8 in the morning is worth something to Kroger that has nothing to do with the milk. They are worth something because of what that pattern, multiplied across 60 million households, reveals about how people actually shop, and because there are 1,500 companies that will pay generously to know. So put it together. A shopper walks into a supermarket and buys a gallon of milk. The store takes a small loss on that transaction. In return, it gets several things simultaneously. It gets the shopper inside the building, walking past high-margin products, with a perception of cheapness that elevates every other decision they make that visit. It takes a smaller loss than the shelf price implies because it likely processed the milk itself. It collects a slotting fee from the cereal company 3 meters away. And it adds a data point to a profile it will sell to a consumer goods company before the week is out. There is one more layer: own label. National brand milk is sold at a loss, but the store's own brand dairy, the supermarket label yogurt, the own label butter, the own label cheddar, carries a gross margin of 30 to 50%. The branded loss brings the shopper in. The own label range is where the margin waits. The whole structure is a 5-layer machine: loss leader traffic, slotting fees, vertical integration, loyalty data, private label margin, and it runs on the back of a product the shopper knows, trusts, and buys every week without really thinking about why it costs what it costs. The supermarket is not losing money on milk. It is using milk to make money in 5 other places at the same time. Whether that is a masterpiece of retail economics or a system that quietly bankrupted 2 of the oldest names in American dairy, probably depends on where you are standing in the supply chain.